Shalom Uvracha. I want to talk today about whether a younger child can get married before their elder sibling, or do you have to get married according to the order of birth, the older before the younger? Well, we're not the first to think of this question. There's a Gemara Masechet Baba Batra on page Kuf Kaf 120 that discusses an interesting apparent contradiction between two verses in Sefer Bamidbar. There, the Torah lists the daughters of Slofchad, the famous ladies who organized their inheritance in the land of Israel in front of Moshe Rabbeinu. But interestingly enough, when we look at the verses, those mentioned in chapter 27, as opposed to those mentioned again when the story is told over again in chapter 36, we see that the order of the names of the daughters is not the same. So the Gemara asks, why do we have two lists? What is the correct order? And the Gemara says that no, one list is a list according to their birth dates, the chronological list. But the other list is the list according to their chokhmah, their wisdom. The Gemara goes on to say that this fits in very nicely with the opinion of Rabbi Ami, because Rabbi Ami said that when discussing yeshiva, we go according to wisdom. But when we're discussing mesibah, a party, we go according to age. The Rashbam in his commentary asks, what does he mean? What's the situation when we're talking about yeshiva? And what's the situation when we're talking about mesibah? And the Rashbam explains that yeshiva is when we're talking about Torah learning, when we have an academy, a yeshiva, when we want to let great rabbis talk or publish their works. In such a case, we give preference not according to age, but according to wisdom. B'yeshiva alach achrei chokhmah. When we come to a yeshiva, we follow wisdom. But in a mesibah, in a party, explains the Rashbam, what is a party? A party is the wedding parties. When it comes to a party, when it comes to organizing weddings, then, says Rav Ami, we go according to age, eldest before the youngest. This opinion, says the Rashbam, has support. We find support from a very interesting source. The Rashbam brings a proof to this from none other than Lavan, the evil one who tricked Yaakov when he married off Rachel and Leah. When Yaakov woke up in the morning and realized that he'd been tricked and given Leah, the elder sister, instead of Rachel, the younger sister, what did Lavan say? He said, it's not our custom in our location to marry off the younger before the elder. Says the Rashbam that Lavan too, as it were, followed the opinion of Ravi Ami and said when it comes to getting married, you have to do the older before the younger. Tov. This law is not quoted in the Shulchan Aruch at all, but it is found in the works of some of the Rishonim. The Rosh quotes it, and it finds its way into latter-day halacha works. It's found in the work of the Bach, in the work of the Taz, in the Shach, and many other latter-day rabbis. They're quite strong halachic sources. But even people who do bring this as a halacha, that you have to get married from the eldest child to the youngest, agree that there could be certain situations where we would make exceptions. First of all, they say that if the elder child is willing to forego their right, then you can skip over them. Or alternatively, if they don't forego their rights, or we're too embarrassed to ask them, or we don't want to make people upset, even in such a case, if the younger child has reached the age of marriage, then they don't have to wait anymore. It's interesting, they put the age of marriage in these sources as 20, 22. I don't want to put any pressure on anyone. No one should feel under any obligation here. Perhaps in our generation we get married a little bit later. But say the poskim that if the younger child is now not so young, we also don't have to wait. Also, if there's any other great need the rabbis would agree that even though in general we should follow the halacha to marry from the oldest to the youngest, if there was a great need, we wouldn't let that hold us back and we'd go ahead and marry the younger before the older. But what's very interesting is the opinion of Rav Moshe Feinstein. Rav Moshe Feinstein, in his response to Igor Moshe, argues with the whole concept. He says like this, he says, we don't find a source that would say that someone who wants to do a mitzvah has to wait until someone else does the mitzvah first. There's no difference between the simplest Jew and the greatest Jew. That a simple Jew who is ready to do a mitzvah doesn't have to wait and give honor to another Jew to do it first. And a younger sibling doesn't have to wait for their older sibling to find a spouse and get married. So he says, how am I going to explain the Gemara? He says the Gemara is talking about a situation where all the siblings, all the daughters of Slofchad, found their partners and were all ready to get married at the same time. Then the question is, well, we can only marry one chuppah at a certain time. The parents have to be at each chuppah. The wedding party has to come together. We can't do all the weddings spontaneously. We're going to have to do someone first. In such a case, the elder child gets preference over the younger child. But in a case where the elder child is not ready to get married at all, there's not even a question, says Rav Feinstein. It's a very interesting explanation because it fits in quite nicely, because we know that the daughters of Slofchad were told that they weren't allowed to marry because of the problem of the inheritance of the land of Israel, and only at a certain date were they all allowed to marry. And so we can assume that they all were ready to get married exactly at the same time, and then we had to give preference one to the other. And so too in the case of Rachel and Leah, according to Lavan, they were both ready to get married on the same night, and therefore he gave preference to the elder child. But in a case where the older child hasn't found their partner yet, we don't have to wait for them. That's the opinion of Rav Feinstein. In any event, let's take this opportunity to give a bracha to all of Am Yisrael, to all the singles. They should manage to find their partner speedily, with no difficulties, to build a bayit ne'eman b'Yisrael, a faithful house amongst the people of Israel. Shalom uvracha.